Greetings from Hilo, Hawaii. In this video, we are going to show how to automatically water pole beans using a homemade float valve. Today's story actually began several years ago when I bought new windows for my house. The windows were securely packed in this neat wooden crate. By strategically placing boards on the bottom and lining them with polyethylene, I had a tank and framework that could accommodate a trellised crop. The tank was about 1 foot wide, 6 inches high, and 6 feet long. I decided to grow pole beans in growing medium. Growing medium is expensive in Hawaii. Fortunately, my friend JK gave me some thermoformed plastic sheet pots, which were placed upside down in the tank to save growing medium and also provide some aeration to the roots. Let's try to automatically water the beans by placing a homemade float valve in the tank, which will maintain a 1.5 inch water depth to sub-irrigate the crop. A water level indicator will verify that the float valve is working. Rainwater is collected from my greenhouse roof and stored in this 55-gallon plastic barrel. The top of the barrel was cut out with a sawzall. Wooden blocks were fastened to the top with screws, and the blocks keep the top from falling in. Screen was placed over the barrel to keep the mosquitoes out. A commercial cattle tank float valve was fastened to the top of the barrel, and this fills the tank with municipal water when there isn't enough rain. Water flows by gravity through a 1/4 inch microtube into a 1/2 inch polyethylene tube, which then routes the water to the float valve in the growing tank. Compressed coconut fiber, or coir, was soaked in water to hydrate and expand and will be used as the growing medium. Dolomite was mixed in the coir at the rate of about 1 tablespoon per gallon. Dolomite is a good source of calcium and magnesium. The growing medium was placed in the tank. Nutri-Coat is a slow-release fertilizer which contains nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, some calcium and magnesium, plus the micronutrients boron, copper, iron, manganese, and molybdenum. Type 270 releases over 270 days. A 100-day release product would have been preferred, but I only had the 270-day release formulation. 1 pound was weighed. If a 100-day release formulation was used, then only about 1/2 pound would have been applied. A band of fertilizer was applied in the middle of the tank. It was mixed into the top 2 inches of growing medium. A plastic mulch film was placed over the top of the tank. This will conserve water by retarding evaporation. Beans were seeded on November 29th in seedling medium, and 2 sprouted seeds were transplanted per hole on December 6th. Beans are not normally transplanted, but I did this because I was still working on my tank. This photo was taken on December 10th, which is 12 days after seeding. This is 19 days after seeding, and the plants are growing well. But then the seal of the float valve failed and delivered too much water, so I switched to my second float valve model. The float valve was wrapped with a perforated plastic bag. I'll show you more about the construction of this float valve later in this video. The float valve was placed in the tank, and the plants continued to grow. And grow. And really grow. Blossoms and little beans are forming at 47 days after seeding. It's 52 days after seeding, and we're making our first picking. Plants look nice and healthy. The first picking was a little bit light, but boy, they sure were delicious. At 61 days after seeding, the window crate is pretty well filled with bean vines. And there are a lot of beans forming. It's time to take a video bean tour. Which beans would I pick now? Which beans would I wait on for a few more days? Decisions, decisions, decisions. At 64 days after seeding, we have a pretty big harvest. Wow, the beans weigh more than 2.5 pounds. That's more than a kilogram. At 75 days after seeding, the plants are starting to look a little bit worn out. Another week has passed and the plants look a little bit worse. They're not producing many beans, so we'll terminate the crop at this point. The plastic mulch was removed. There are many small roots in the growing medium. The first crop only lasted 82 days, and the 270-day slow-release fertilizer should be good for another 2 crops, but I decided to live it up a little and add more fertilizer. Actually, I thought the previous crop was just a little bit low on fertilizer. The fertilizer was mixed in the top 2 inches of the growing medium. 2 seeds were planted directly in the old planting holes. In retrospect, it would have been prudent to wait 2 weeks between crops to let the old roots and shoots decompose. Most of the seeds germinated, but I had to replant a few holes. At 2 weeks after seeding, I'm noticing that the terminal leaves on some plants are fairly light colored. I'm guessing it's iron deficiency. At 20 days after seeding, 1 teaspoon of iron chelate was added to the water barrel. This is equivalent to about 3 parts per million of elemental iron in the water. At 28 days after seeding, the iron deficiency is still visible on several plants. After another week has passed, the plants seem to be recovering. It's 41 days after seeding and the plants are looking healthy as a horse. The leaves are nice and green and there's no sign of iron deficiency. Look at the size of these leaves. Flowers and new beans are forming at 47 days after seeding. The plants have been producing beans and continue to look healthy. It seems that we can conclude that pole beans grow well in growing medium when they are automatically sub-irrigated with a float valve. Let's show how to construct the float valve. Actually, the float valve has been discussed in more detail in 2 other videos. First, the main body is fastened to a wooden block which keeps the float valve weighted down. A 1/4 inch polytube connector will serve as the nozzle. The tubing is heated slightly with a propane torch, and the nozzle is inserted into the tubing. The tubing is pulled through the float valve body and the wooden block. It fits very nice and tightly. Previously, SureTape 1/8 inch IT100 polyethylene foam was used as the seal, but recent experience has shown that 1/4 inch neoprene foam is an improvement. A piece of solid plastic backing was cut from a pot. It is needed to attach the foam seal to. 2 holes are drilled in the solid plastic backing. The backing is removed from the 1/4 inch thick neoprene foam to reveal the sticky side. The foam adheres to the plastic backing. The plastic backing is attached to a 2 3/4 inch square piece of extruded polystyrene with short pieces of cable ties. Drainage holes are drilled in the bottom cover of the float valve body. The extruded polystyrene square with the neoprene foam seal is placed in the float valve body. Then the other polystyrene square is added, the lid is snapped on, and the float valve is ready to go. People have often remarked, "Bernie, you're full of beans." And I reply, yes, but my beans are automatically watered by an inexpensive homemade float valve. And I catch rainwater from the greenhouse roof and supplement it with municipal water when needed. And water use is minimized by a plastic mulch which greatly reduces evaporation losses. There is no leaching of water or nutrients, and electrical power or expensive equipment is not needed. And only one fertilizer application is needed per crop. So get on the ball, and you too can be full of beans in about 2 months from now. Aloha!